the Bronx. A single 3 and out. Here's a snap over the head of Johnson into the end zone. Johnson can't get to it, and the Braves recover it for a defensive touchdown.
Welcome into Sports Night. I'm Jake Hibbard. Thanks so much for tuning in, and thank you to First Bank of Wyoming for making this show possible. Conference football got started up last week in 3A. The Western Conference has 3 winners, Star Valley among them, after they beat Jackson 55-7 in the fall brawl. Evanston also 1-0, as is Cody. The 0-1 teams in the Western Conference, Powell, Green River, and of course Jackson. Isn't it wild? After this season so far, only one game technically counts. That is as far as playoffs go. And that's what we're playing for, right? And of course, everyone knows who's coming to town. Number 1 versus number 2 for that week. The Cody Bronx, Star Valley Braves. But first, in order for that to be number 1, number 2, when we get there next week, first up has Powell on the road tomorrow night. Now, we get an earlier kickoff, 5 o'clock. How about that? Might even have some daylight left after the game. And that's a 3A West matchup with a lot of history. If we're talking state championships, 2012, 2016, and 2019 are the 3 times Star Valley and Powell have met up in Laramie. Powell won the first one, and Star Valley took the last 2. Speaking of the year 2012, that was McKay Young's first with the program when he jumped over from the Spud State in Malad to become the offensive coordinator. That is to say, he's got some experience preparing for this Powell team.
They don't get super fancy. They just do what they do really, really well. There's a reason they're consistently towards the top in defensive ranking.
And if you want to talk about that Powell Panthers defense, you could do a lot worse than by starting with those 2 guys right there. That's Keona Wisniewski doing the stretch out there. He's a 3rd-year starter at middle linebacker.
He is good. Like, he has caused us problems the last couple of years with how aggressive he is. He's a great at reading, and no, he's a fantastic middle linebacker. So now for him to roll over and be the captain of the offense too, good football player for sure.
Now, Wisniewski is quarterback on this team as well for the offense, and he leads the team with a 36% run share. And when he takes off and runs, it looks more like he's trying to tackle you.
He does do that. He does do that. You know, and we have a history of physical quarterbacks here in Star Valley, so it's something I can appreciate.
And then number 77, that's Big Doug Betker. You know, Powell's defense is always anchored in the middle by some big defensive linemen. Well, Doug doesn't necessarily get the stats, but he will be someone that Star Valley's offensive line will certainly have to deal with tomorrow night. So we know Powell's defense is always solid, and this year it includes 11 seniors in that 11-man unit. Offensively, Powell's usually pretty conservative. Run the football to set up a pass. Not much has changed this year. They still run pretty heavily, whether that's the quarterback or one of their running backs, and they utilize several different packages and formations, whether that's a 31 package out of the Power I. They run a lot of 20 personnel out of the pistol set. They'll also run split back shotgun out of that same package. They'll utilize trips in the gun, as well as a shotgun flex look that shows itself a lot like the old Flexbone offense, except with Wisniewski in the shotgun instead of under center. But as we'll see, it really works more like a 21. At least that's how I see it, but I'm just the guy who yells into your YouTube on Thursday nights. And as your designated YouTube yeller, I've noticed 2 things that I'd like to bring up regarding this Powell offense. One is time, and the second is tendency. And no, it's not just because they both start with T. By time, I mean how long does it take from the football to hit the ground from the last play to be snapped into the quarterback's hands on the next play. When Star Valley's taking on a team like Cody next week, the average time between the ball being downed on the last play to it being snapped on the next play, and no, I'm not talking play clock, I mean actual time, is about 19.5 seconds. Compare that with where Powell is at over 38 seconds. Now, lots of teams huddle. That's not necessarily a bad thing in itself. What I do notice, though, is that a team like Star Valley that's used to playing hurry-up offense and, as a result, can play on the fly defensively, this game being slowed down is probably more of an advantage to Star Valley. Star Valley's used to playing with that shorter recovery time. A couple of things from this. One, I think that plays more to the advantage of Star Valley, which is used to playing a hurry-up offense and defense by virtue, that a slowed down offense shouldn't really phase them. And on Powell's side, because it takes so much time to get to the line of scrimmage, the play clock is usually running down, which limits the amount of time you can really make adjustments once to the line of scrimmage. So when Powell breaks the huddle, they're going to run the play that they called. And in regards to their play calling, I'd like to get to now my second point. tendency. This is just my observation, but in games I've watched where Powell's taken on Cody, Douglas, and Lander, the offense really showed tendencies to stick with the formation for a series regardless of down or distance. In a scoring drive on September 20th against Douglas, Powell ran a 9-play, 55-yard drive that started on their own 45-yard line entirely in the power I. Powell will also jump into the power I almost any time they get into the red zone, but you could see them run an entire series with 2 fullbacks and a halfback in the backfield. On a September 13th scoring drive against Lander, which took just 3 plays, we saw Powell 3 times line up in that flex shotgun look. First with a fullback dive, then a quarterback keeper, and then a touchdown pass running flood. I think with the regularity I saw it occur, it's more than just a one-off. Powell may call plays that don't really change the package, don't really change the personnel, and that's also a thing that I think Star Valley is more than happy to accommodate. When you don't switch personnel packages, even if you switch a formation like Powell may do in that flex look to the trips, there's really not much of a change, period. That's because with this flex bone, it's not really what I'd call a triple option. The left back there is Caden Nelson, and he's the man who goes into motion in this flex. Now in a flex bone offense, the guy you expect to get the bulk of your carries is your fullback, after that your quarterback, and then your wing backs or A-backs after that. However, Caden Nelson's run share is under 4% on the season, which tells me he's much more of a third wide receiver in this set than he is a running option. And then we have our other A-back on this side. He really acts as a fullback or tight end depending on how the play calls for it, but again, really is not a running option. Now that's all to say that this slow and methodical offense could work in Powell's favor if they were to get a positive game script, as the Panthers really hang their hat on defense. The offense often is used as kind of an extension of the defense to just keep the opposing offense off the field as long as possible. At any rate, should be a gregreat contest tomorrow night. Kick off an early one, 5 o'clock on the road again at Powell. Also, before we go, let's take a look at what we've got coming up in volleyball, as tonight, Kelly Walsh at home. You can catch that one on SVI Media. And tomorrow at 11 a.m., Natrona County is in Star Valley Gymnasium. And that leads me to my final portion of today's show, which is the return of Casper to the Western Conference. It's completely new territory for Star Valley to have a couple of volleyball matches of consequence against Kelly Walsh and Natrona County on back-to-back days. And when it comes regional time, it'll be even stranger territory to see both Casper schools again playing in the same division. That should never have been the case, but the quadrant system, which was rolled out several years ago, was just not a perfect system. Just like Wyoming, despite being basically a square, doesn't really have any uniform position for where its towns go. And so out of what was seen at that time as necessity, Kelly Walsh and Natrona County were split apart, one going to the east for 2 years, one going to the west for 2 years, and then they'd flip-flop. It's that time of the year where we start asking, hey, are we better off than we were 4 years ago? Well, when it comes to the state of Wyoming sports, as a result of the quadrant system, no, we're not. Kelly Walsh and Natrona County need to be rivals. They need to be pushing the Western Conference to rise above the lack of population west of the center of Wyoming, which is Casper, right? Taking apart a rivalry like that has not just hurt the Western Conference, it's hurt both of those schools, and you can see the toll that it's taken of switching west to east, east to west, because when we started this, Kelly Walsh and Natrona were known as powerhouses in multiple sports, and as we exit it, both of those schools are looking to rebuild several of those programs. So 4 years from now, absolutely, we'll be better off because Casper is coming to Star Valley regularly and for games of consequence. I don't know how often I do this, so nice job, Wyoming Activities Association, for finally getting this one right. That's it for me. Thanks so much for tuning in. Don't forget, kickoff tomorrow, an early one, 5 o'clock on SVInews.com. I'll be on the air just after 4:30 with your pregame and the highlights throughout. See you then.